Okay, so we've had a few questions about using Excel for one of the Maths Practicals tutorial sheet thingies. So I thought I'd go through some of the things that you need to do to just plot up graphs in Excel for this question. So showing here is the question over here. Question, yeah. So download deforestation XLS, which is this file in the background here. It describes annual deforestation data in how many kilometers squared per year are lost from being a tree to not being tree covered in the Amazon basin. Okay. So the question asks you to first of all plot the deforestation data. Okay, so we'll just go through how to do that. So I'll just move this over here, give us some space. So these are the data here that we want to plot. So the easiest way of doing that is just to highlight the data and then insert a chart. But before we do that, we'll just have a quick look at the data itself. So this these data here, you can see, are numbers, and these data along in the first column, in column A, are actually text. You can see at the top here it says text. And if you actually think about it, 87/88, that's not a number, although I mean it is a number. It's a fraction. But the way Excel is treating this is it's basically just a string of text. Okay, so that limits the number of graphs that we can plot with this data, with these data, because data are plural. But that doesn't really matter for this question. We can just highlight all of the data. So I'm just using the mouse to do that. Or if you want to, just use the arrow keys and move around. If you hold down Shift as you move around with data, you can highlight blocks of data. And then if you hold down Control and click, it kind of goes to the bottom of the block of data which you're working in. It's just a shortcut which enables you to highlight data a bit more quickly. So I'm going to go up to the top here. Top menu, insert, and I'm going to insert a chart. And it actually recommends me some charts up here that I might want to plot. So let's just pick a line plot like this. And I guess we don't really need to worry about which kind this is, but let's pick one of them that shows it with data. So there we go. So the first thing to do is just make this a little bit bigger so we can kind of see it. Now you'll notice that there's not there are numbers down this side of the graph here, but no axes lines. The first thing we're going to do, if we double click on that, it'll bring up the axis format, and we can change the minimum and maximum values. That will change the range in which it's plotting over here. But if you click on the paint can, this gives us the options to have a line rather than automatic, which seems to be no line. That gives us a nice black one, and we'll give that a thickness of 2 for no reason. And we could then also do for the x-axis, we can make that a solid line, thickness of 2. There. Another thing we can do is we can kind of start to play around with the formats of the background here. I have an irrational hatred of grid lines unless they actually mean something on a plot, so I'm going to get rid of those for starters. So just highlight the grid lines, and it says format major grid lines now over here, so I can just have no line. Isn't that beautiful? Maybe the data points are a bit small to see, so again we can format the data points. If you click on the data points, it changes this panel over on the right to format the data series. Click the paint can here. I can make my markers. I'm going to mark options, choose the built-in ones rather than the automatic, and I give them some bigness, and we can kind of start to see them there. I can also kind of play around with the border on these to make them kind of look nice. Isn't that lovely? The text on the axes is a bit small, so I could change that by I think formatting the number down here. Maybe not. Maybe the labels. No, it's not there. It's somewhere on here, or it might be in text options. That's it. I can go to the where is it? I don't seem to find make this bigger because I don't usually use this. I actually prefer if you on the home menu, once you've got the axis highlighted, you can just up here make the numbers a bit bigger. so that's made those a bit bigger. We can kind of see a little bit more what's going on now. What's missing now is axes labels. So if I once again go up to our chart tools up here, I can go to the design and then add a chart element. I can add horizontal and vertical axes labels there, and I can change what they say. So I could say D4S deforestation in kilometers squared per year on there, and obviously I could have this one down here just being year, and again these are horribly small and hard to see, so I can make them bigness if I so choose. Okay. And in this case, I don't really need a chart title because the chart title is telling me, well, all the information deforestation and year is made a title that just says deforestation per year is superfluous, so I can delete that, just make sure it's selected and then hit the delete key and it's gone. Okay, so that's how to draw a graph. Okay, so that kind of answers part A up here. If we just bring that back. So the next part is calculate and plot how each year is different from the long-term mean. So again, we're going to have to make another graph. But before we do that, we need to calculate the mean and then how different each point is. So to calculate the mean, that's very straightforward. I just pick a cell somewhere in the spreadsheet and then equals average. If you type it in correctly, it does kind of hint that you'll give you a hint down here that you are correct in the select formula. So select average and then open brackets and then select the numbers I want to average together. So that's all of these. And again, you could highlight those with the mouse or just with the arrow keys, and then that gives me the average deforestation per year. So then to work out the difference between them, I could just make a new column here and then call this one difference. I could spell that correctly or not, doesn't really matter. From mean, and that's also in kilometers squared per year. Okay, so I'm going to type in a formula here which is going to look at basically how different this number is from the average. So that's going to be that number and then minus and then click on that one there. Okay, so if I hit enter, this shows me that this first year is 3,947 bigger than the average year. Okay. Now I could just copy that formula down. Okay, you see the strange things going on now, and that's because if we look at what it's actually doing, is it's moving the cell reference for the data down one, for the B7 here, that's going down one, but not, but it's also moving down this cell reference. We want this one. Okay, you can just drag these around if you wanted to change what the cell reference is. So we could do that for all of them and go double click on that and then drag that one back up again, which would be extremely tedious. In fact, that's, yes, well actually it's given me a negative number. That's fine because this number is smaller than that number. Everything is okay. But a faster way of doing this is actually you use a feature of Excel which fixes the cell reference that gets when you copy formulas in spreadsheets. And the way to do this is to add in front of the C and the 3 these little dollar signs. Another way of doing this is rather than actually enter them in yourself, you could just go to after the cell reference and just press F4 on your keyboard, and if you repeatedly press S4 you can see it cycles through all of the options for where the dollar signs could potentially go. So I just put both of them in there. So that means that the row and the column and the row will always be fixed irrespective of wherever I copy this formula. So if I just enter that in there, and now if I just copy all of that down, you see wherever I'm looking at this formula here, it's always referring to this fixed cell reference here. Okay. So now these are the average data which I want to plot. So the first thing to say is, well, I could kind of make another graph like this, and then change all of these things, or the axis and that kind of stuff. But that was a bit of a faff, wasn't it? So what I'll do is I'll just move this one to the side, and I'll actually just copy the whole graph and make a new copy and paste that here. Okay, so there's our new graph. Okay, we could maybe even place them one on top of each other like that, so when we print them out, they're all nice and fancy pants. Now we select one of these graphs. Actually, I'll just move them over a little bit so see the data which we're do that. See the data we're looking at. If I click on the data, okay, it's highlighting the data which we're plotting. Now, if I move the mouse over the edge of that selection, I get the four-way arrow, and I can just click and drag that across. I can drag it to anywhere on the spreadsheet, but if I click it over the new data that I want to plot, you can see it's now plotting these data rather than these data. Okay. So there is some things that I need to change here. So you can see that it's got the axis going down the middle here, which is a bit annoying. So I could actually change where that crosses by selecting the axis and then going up to this little skyscraper in the format axis options, clicking axis options, and the horizontal axis crosses at, instead of crossing at 0, I can get it to cross at, say, minus 15,000. So if I type in minus 15,000 and enter, you see that moves that down to there. Okay, so that's plotting graphs. So there are lots of different options with plotting graphs, which you can kind of explore at your own, leisure. I should change the this to different from mean there, so it actually makes a little more sense. So the next part of the question, so using your knowledge and relationship between probability and the mean and standard deviation, comment on the magnitude of recent deforestation rates. So the recent deforestation rates are these data here. It looks like there has been a decline in the deforestation rate. So what we want to do is compare the variance of the data, or the variability of the data out here, and is that outside of the range which we would expect given the spread of data before. Okay, so if we calculate the standard deviation of all of these data, are these anomalously kind of outside of that range? What we can do is we can, I guess I'll just move those over by giving myself some space. So rather than calculating the mean, I can do another calculation where I calculate the standard deviation. Equals standard deviation. Now I don't have the whole population, I just have a sample of all possible years. So I will use standard deviation of a sample, S, and then select all of the lovely data. And there we go. So that gives me a standard deviation of 5,580. See if I can maybe make these bigger so we can see them. We go view, let's zoom in. Zoom. Okay, so that might make it a bit easier to see. Now, I could in fact just highlight everything and go to home, just give it more bigness. Ooh, that certainly is bigness. So the key question really is, that's horrible. I'm going to undo that. Do these data fall outside of that range of basically the mean plus or minus this number? So one way that we can plot these means on the graphs. If I just go back and actually do that, so we can see some more. If I just scroll over and down, basically what we want to see on this graph is maybe a horizontal line going across here that shows where the mean is, and maybe another set of horizontal lines where 1 standard deviation is and 2 standard deviation. So to do that, we need to create some more kind of basically data. So if we go up to here, and back to our, we could have a column for the mean and a column for the standard deviation positive and the standard deviation negative. And we could also, maybe if we wanted to look between 1 and 2 standard deviations, we could maybe have 2 standard deviation positive and 2 standard deviation negative. Should be it. Okay, so to work out the mean, we've already worked out the mean, so the mean is just going to be equal to this cell up here, and we want it to always equal that. So just put the dollar signs in, and if I double click when I put the black cross in the corner, that fills everything in. Now I'm going to want the mean plus the standard deviation, so that's going to be equal to the mean. Okay, or I could just select this mean up here and then make sure that it's always going to refer to that, plus the standard deviation. So it's always going to be that cell. Okay, I could do the same for minus, so it's going to be equal to mean, always that cell, minus standard deviation, it's that cell. So I can then copy this down, which is nice. In fact, I could copy these two across. Now that gives me these new formulas, and if I wanted to have this number plus 2 times this number, I could just put that in there and amend the formula. Okay, usual orders of operation apply. So I then can copy those down, as it were. So now I want to make a graph that has all of those data on. That's kind of lines going across. So I could go to our graph down here. Just go across to our graph. We can, oh, that is. Where's that from? Well, that's odd. Let's go back over here. So if I want to add data to a graph, there are a number of ways of doing that. So I can click on the graph, go to select data, and then this window pops up here where it's got the series 1. So that's the first data series we put in. We can just add another data series. Okay. Now, because it's not an XY plot, we've just got basically words along the bottom. I can't select different words for the X axis, but that's okay because we've got the same X values as the previous data series. So I'm just going to give this a series name, and I'm going to select that from this cell here. And the series values is just going to be those data there. Why didn't that work? Okay, appears to have worked. There should be text in here, but we're just going to click OK. And that seems to have worked. If I click OK, we go down and we can see that it's put those data in quite nicely there. Now I could, again, go and click on this and start to change its appearance because it's got orange dots with an orange line. I might want to actually not have any dots at all, so I can go to marker options under the paint can and say I don't want any points, I just want a line. So I can look at the line, and actually I don't want it to be orange, I might want it to be black. Everyone likes a nice black line. And then I could do the same thing for the other data series. I'm just going to show you a little trick to kind of speed up that process. So if I go back to the graph, so rather than adding into the individual data series, what you can do is you can take the whole chart, so click on the chart so it's highlighted everything, copy the whole thing, so I've just copied it with Control C and then Control V, paste it into itself. Okay, I'll just press Control V. So now if we actually go and look at select data, you can see there are 2 copies of everything. Okay. Now I can use those 2 copies to plot the other things I want to plot. In fact, I'm not going to have just one copy. I'm going to click on it again. I'm going to paste into it again. You might see some more points have appeared on here. So what I can do now is I'm actually going to zoom out because this is a bit annoying. View, zoom out. Okay, and then go back to where I've actually got some data. I'm going to move this up for now and move this one down so we can actually see what we're doing. So now if I click on, I've got 4 sets of data that fall along this black line here, and 2 sets of data that are along this line that goes up and down like this. So if I click one of those, I can see that it's plotting this number against that number. Now, if I grab the handle along the edge here, I can just drag that across and make that one, instead of plotting the data, plot my standard deviation positive. It's plotting it there. Okay. As I've made that one kind of nice, I'll actually change that background. So I'll make this one the standard deviation positive. I'll make that one standard deviation negative. And I'll put this one back as being the number. Okay. Then I've got the other sets of data which are along this line along the middle. I can just move that across to wherever I want and add data series like this, which is much more satisfying and much faster. Okay, so now I seem to have got rid of the mean, which is annoying. I'll put that back. And just add it in manually. Select data, add, and I want this to be those data there. Should do. Why has that not worked? Those data. Add a data series. Oh, I think I just gave it the series name, which was foolish. Series name will be that. And hopefully that will, yes, you see that's added that at the bottom there. I just click OK and get rid of those. Now, I could then go in and edit each one of these and get rid of the markers. I'm not interested in having markers on those, and maybe make them different colors, or actually make them dotted. And maybe make the one standard deviation one maybe gray. The no markers on this over there. Markers. No markers on that one, but I'll make it grey to match the one above. Oh, that's the marker option. Line, solid line, grey. Everyone likes grey. And line, solid line, black, but dashed. Okay. So now we've generated a graph which shows the deforestation in kilometers squared per year, and also shows the mean value going across the middle. So we can now look at addressing the question. Okay. So using our knowledge of relations between probability and the mean and standard deviation, comment on the magnitude of recent deforestation rates. So we can see that these recent data are, well, they start to fall outside of one standard deviation, which is here, but they're within 2 standard deviation. If we go and have actually look at the lecture slide, which I think looks a bit like this. So if we've got a population of data, that's here, with a mean, 1 standard deviation, that's basically, you've got a 2 in 3, or a kind of a 67% ish chance that your data will fall between the plus or minus 1 standard deviation, but there is a kind of a 1 in 3 chance, a non-zero, about 33% chance that actually just the data should fall outside of that 1 standard deviation range. Whereas at the 2 standard deviation range, it's much less likely that your data will fall outside that range of plus or minus 2 standard deviations. So if we go back to the Excel thing now, which is here, see it's very unlikely that well, so it's we can see that actually within looking at our data over this last few years here, or I guess the last few years as it was in 2009, it's within the range of which we would expect in terms of the variability that we're seeing across the time series. Okay, so that's what we're asking you to look at for that part of the question. So hopefully this has shown you how to plot up data in Excel, how to make a graph, how to manipulate how it looks by changing the axes, adding scales, how to add horizontal lines onto these graphs by making your own data series and then adding those data series to the plots. Okay, so hopefully this has been useful. If it's not been useful, then come and tell us in the tutorials, and we will endeavour to be better generally as people. Okay, I'll stop there.